Okay, so here's where I want to start this morning, you guys, is with this question, can truth be known? Is there such a thing as truth? Maybe you'd say it this way, does truth, capital T, even really exist? Or, sitting in my office Friday, bored with myself, going, man, I got to bring some creativity to this weekend, and so I thought, who has a pipe? Because somehow, it feels to me like it should be like, right, can truth be known? Right? Like some sophisticated, does it even exist? Sorry if that's offensive to you, but for some reason I picture a guy with a long white beard and a pipe. Though I'm not going to tell you whose this is. I leave that between you and the Lord. Oh, okay. Does it exist? Is all truth relative? These are pressing questions in the world in which we live, right? Can we even know what it is? Truth, capital T. Is it real? Now, for some of you, I'm probably hitting on questions that you've never even really thought about. And for you, I'm particularly excited for this morning because, quite frankly, the day's coming, you know? Perhaps you're in junior high or high school, and so you haven't thought about this stuff because of the nature, frankly, of the way our minds work. Maybe you're not there yet. Maybe you haven't been in that classroom yet. Maybe you haven't heard that talk yet. But the day's coming when your world will spin really quickly, where things will challenge you in ways you didn't know that you could be challenged, and you'll find yourself wondering, really? Have I been deceived my entire life? Does truth even really exist? Perhaps you're someone new to Jesus, which is remarkable and awesome. And people who have followed Jesus for years and decades can attest to the fact that part of the spiritual growth process is you'll, no matter your age, you'll arrive at that place. Really? God? Really? Like Jesus, pretty exclusive. Really, God? Like, can truth really be known to that degree? For some of you, perhaps, this question strikes right at the heart of what agitates you about culture and the direction culture is headed. For some of you, this might strike right at the heart of what makes you nervous, maybe angry, or maybe just scared. Perhaps you're the person who left the tracks on our doorstep last weekend, like afraid of the direction this place is headed. It actually did happen. I get here at 6 and kind of stay here till 7:30, help set up, and then when the band starts going, then I get out of here and I walk over to the office and get ready for the morning. And last week when I did that at about 20 to 8, there was a stack of tracts sitting on our doorstep out here. So someone thinks we're heretics. I'm not sure. But right, for some of you, maybe those questions strike right at the heart of, like, you can relate to Jesus and his weeping over Jerusalem. Because as you look ahead at the world that your kids are entering, the world in which they'll go to high school, the world in which they'll go to college, and even more, the world that your grandkids will grow up in, it frightens you. The complete erosion of any notion of truth. For some of you, though, I suspect that the question, can truth even be known, strikes right at the heart of your God confusion. 2 weeks ago, we started this series called The God Confusion, and we've been saying that we're wrestling with how to find a faith that is real and makes sense. And for some of you, perhaps what you've realized, and I think correctly so, is that the notion a faith that is real and makes sense, it implies the pursuit of truth, capital T. And it's at that intersection where your wheels lock up, where the wheels in your brain come to a screeching halt. It's at that point in your spiritual journey where your confusion hits its highest point. Because truth, capital T, is a little disconcerting for you, unnerving perhaps. You don't know what to do with it. And it's at the very core of what confuses you about God and the notion of God. And I think lots of us can relate to where you're at. And frankly, the more you think about this, lots of things don't help. Like, consider the study of epistemology. You know that? The study of how we know what we know. Like how we understand what we understand. I mean, the more you think about this, these types of studies, they don't help. Because, well, let's just consider, it wasn't that long ago when everyone knew that the earth was flat. It wasn't that long ago when everyone knew that the sun revolved around the earth. It wasn't that long ago when everyone knew that slavery was religiously justified. It wasn't that long ago. I was watching this terrible 80s movie with my family on Friday, like Dragon Slayer or Dragon Heart, I think it was what it was called. It's good and terrible all at the exact same time. But I was reminded in that, the world in which there's kings and there's peasants. Some of you probably know this already, but Like that was a theologically justified system created by Christ-following people because they knew that God appointed some to be kings and to have a monopoly on wealth and land, and the God of the Bible appointed others to be peasants. It wasn't that long ago before people knew that stuff. And if you're someone that can relate to the agitation that I'm trying to empathize with this morning, then you're aware of the question, like, how do I know if what I know is true? How do I know if what I think is true is going to be proven in history to have been false? Wasn't that long ago before everyone knew that women were less than men, that they were created, to wash their underwear and cook their meals and birth their kids. How do we know if what we know is actually true? Think of the O.J. trial. During the O.J. trial, the vast majority of people who were of the same race as the accused knew that he was innocent. And simultaneously, the vast majority of people who were of the same race as the victim, and thus different race than the accused, knew that he was guilty. How do we know if what we know is just a reflection of our bents and prejudices and, our own issues? Because this is really the issue, right? Like, if you can relate to this, then it means you're a postmodern mind. And it's not your fault. You've been raised in a postmodern world, perhaps, or maybe you're just kind of bend in that direction in the way you think. And what it means is you're aware of the fact that our interpretation of truth, our ability to talk about truth, is necessarily covered by our politics, our presuppositions, our bents, our personalities, our DNA, our culture, our backgrounds, by who raised us and where they raised us and how they raised us. That's what causes your wheels to lock up. You live in this muddy world where you understand truth is colored by your culture. So can it be known? Is it even real? If you're raised in Iran, frankly, you're likely to know that Islam is true. And if you're raised in the Bible Belt, you're likely to know that some hyper-conservative form of Protestantism is true. If you're raised in India, you're likely to know that Hinduism is true, as is the caste system. If you're raised in China, you're likely to know that Confucianism or Buddhism or some variation thereof is true. If you're raised in France, you're likely to know that secular humanism or atheism is true. How do we know if what we say is truth is, just a reflection of our own bents, our own world, our own culture? Maybe they're heretical statements, Maybe they're undignified questions, but they're pressing questions for those of us that are really wrestling with God confusion. This summer, Teresa's family, it's messed up like all families, and so there's lots of people everywhere, and we had to go to a family reunion in Shelby. So I've never been to Shelby, Montana, but now that I live in Helena, it's a doable drive. So we made our way on a Friday afternoon. We went to Shelby. We have 3 little boys, 6, 4, and 3 at the time, and so motel rooms are a joke. They're a waste of money. You shouldn't do that because, either you end up in jail before the night's over, or you just feel like you completely wasted your money because, you guys have done this, right? Like motel rooms, little kids, not smart. So they all stayed in a motel room. We stayed at the campground, but we're also not dummies, so we set up our tent at the campground, had the traditional tent fight. You know what I'm talking about? Like, ever set up a tent with your spouse? It's like right on the tag, will fight with spouse. Set it up by yourself, it'll be fine. Set it up with your spouse, not going to be good. So we checked that one off the list, and then her sister rolled up, so I became, the heel of a husband guy. That whole process happened as well. And then we're like, well, let's go to the swimming pool and let's go swimming. They'll go swimming. So we get to the swimming pool. The plan was that there'd be a bunch of young cousins there. We got to the pool, no cousins, really not a pool. It was like an oversized hot tub. But the boys had the place to themselves, with the exception of 2 of Teresa's nieces were there, and they were sitting in the hot tub. And just to give some context, I think they're 21 and 16. And, candidly, like very pretty, very beautiful gals from Washington, all done up, super girly girls, and halter top bikinis, whole deal. So pretty people. So the boys, they jump in the pool, they splash, they raise a ruckus. Girls are in the hot tub. Eventually, I can't remember how long, Chase, our 4-year-old, he rolls out of the hot tub, and or rolls out of the swimming pool, and he slides over to the hot tub. Slides down into the hot tub. They've never met. So Alyssa, the 21, 22 maybe, she said, what's your name? And Chase said, some people call me the ladies' man. Exactly. That's what we did too. Now, here's the deal. Yeah, yeah. They know the truth of what just happened there. Or at least they think they do, right? Because they're like, oh man, this kid's a pervert, or oh man, this kid watches too much MTV, or oh man, this kid is way too cultured. Like they hear, like this guy slides into the pool, and at 4 years old, he's kind of pretending to be a player and, is trying to get his way with women. That's what they knew happened, right? But I know what really happened. Because I know that the context is we spend a lot of time with our friends the Wongs, and when we spend time over at their house, Lincoln and Justice, oldest and youngest, they gravitate to the garage and spray paint and nails and tools and metal and stuff like that. Chase, he gravitates to the house, where the wife and the daughter hang out. And so, I don't mean that like that's where they have to hang out, that's just kind of the way it happens. And so Chase has developed a nickname from Steve, the ladies' man, which might be prophetic in some way, but like the bigger picture, right, is he gravitates towards the ladies. My point is, it's kind of the struggle with truth, isn't it? How do we know if what we know is true is actually really true, or we just think we know that it's true? Funny, comical, and yet really important, isn't it? I would suggest to you this, that if you're struggling with truth and your ability to know truth, my opinion is that your struggle is probably not with truth, capital T. It's probably not with the existence of truth. It's probably not with whether or not truth exists. You probably theoretically believe in a truth. Your struggle is with the human ability to actually know the truth. It's with the arrogance or the perceived arrogance of saying, this is a complicated, complex world, and I, living in a very certain culture with very certain experiences and very limited knowledge, I know the truth. It's knowing that's your problem. Can we agree? Or at least I would suggest. And here's an example of why I say that. Just look at the way we use the word know. I know the capital of Idaho. I know I exist. I know that 9 times 4 equals 36. I know that water is 2 parts hydrogen and 1 part oxygen. I know Steve Schroeder. I know the town of Butte, Montana like the back of my hand. I do not. I get lost every time I go there. Always going to the same restaurant, always get lost. I know a bargain when I see one. I know that black holes exist. I know that Abraham Lincoln was a great American president. I know the correct answer. I know God exists. I know God. There's our problem. It's with the word know, isn't it? Because sometimes it's very objective, it's very black and white, it's very absolute. But in those instances, it's also very trivial, benign, kind of meaningless, right? But we quickly can get into something much more relative, much more complex. I know the capital of Idaho. Well, does that mean like I can tell you that it's Boise? Or does that mean that I was raised there and I know it like the back of my hand and I know where all the good restaurants are? Like, what does that mean? Knowing is our issue. Now, if you're someone that struggles with this, and I just want you to know, like I wrestled and struggled for you more this week than I have in a long time, because I'm with you, and I visit that place often in my own spiritual journey. I know exactly what you're going through. And here's the deal. I can't relieve the tension for you. I don't think there's a magic answer that just says, go away. Because I think if we're honest, the human experience doesn't afford us much certainty. That there's not a lot that we can say, I know with 100% certainty. In fact, I think you could say it this way, that like the relationship between knowing and believing, they're very married. There's very little that you know that doesn't involve some belief. And there's very little that you believe, or at least if it's good belief, that doesn't involve some knowing. Like, I don't think there's a way that we can just wave a wand or give an answer or point to a verse and say, do away with that tension. Truth is messy, and certainty, I'm going to argue, non-existent outside of anything that's benign and really means nothing anyway to the way we want to live our lives. And so the question becomes, like, where do we go from here? And I'm just going to kind of confess to you that there are people much more intelligent than me, and there are resources that can take this much deeper, that if your interest is the philosophical, intellectual level, you can run down this road for a really long time. But that's not the truth that I'm concerned with here. It's not really the bent of Narrate. Like, I'm passionate about what do I do at 1 o'clock. I'm passionate about how do you navigate life at 5 o'clock this afternoon and tomorrow morning. Our interest is transformational living, not cute, sophisticated answers. And so it strikes me that really we've got a couple options, or at least a couple that I'll speak of. One is you can give up, and lots of people do, and again, I'm with you. I do sometimes too. You can give up, you can throw your hands in the air, you can say truth can't be known, and the result is you'll be very rewarded in our culture. You'll be able to have very sophisticated, eloquent conversations. You'll be very non-offensive in your belief system. You'll be able to carry on and go to college and go to university and go to grad school, and you'll be able to sound so smart and so sophisticated. The struggle, as I see it, is you won't be able to live that out. Like, you can say, truth can't be known. You can even say, I've given up on the notion of truth. But you can't actually live that out. And the reason I say that is because there is an intellectual, philosophical side to truth, right? There's also an intensely practical side to truth. That there's a part of truth that is all about answers in college and all about being able to sound smart. And in some ways, the motives, I keep making it sound like the motives are bad, and I don't mean it that way at all. But there's another form of truth that we all seek, and it's called living our lives. Like, the human desire for knowledge is not just about money, and it's not just about jobs, and it's not just about, gaining an upper hand on our neighbor. It's that we live in a world that's a wreck. That relationships fail and people fail us that we never thought would have failed us. That we disappoint others in ways we never thought we would have disappointed others. That we lose jobs and pink slips come and finances are a wreck, and sometimes we can't pay our bills. It's that disease happens. We can't live without truth because we have to have help navigating the world in which we live. Which strikes me that if we then conclude, I don't need truth, really what we do is we repeat something that is as old as the human story itself, in my view. Genesis 3. In Genesis 3, it says, the serpent was the shrewdest of all the wild animals the Lord God had made. I couldn't remember if we added this. Oh yeah, we did. The serpent was the shrewdest of all the animals the Lord God had made. One day he asked the woman, did God really say you must not eat the fruit from any of the trees in the garden? Of course we may eat fruit from the trees in the garden, the woman replied. It's only the fruit from the tree in the middle of the garden that you're not allowed to eat. God said you must not eat it or even touch it. If you do, you will die. You won't die, the serpent replied to the woman. God knows that your eyes will be opened as soon as you eat it, and you will be like God, knowing both good and evil. The woman was convinced. She saw that the tree was beautiful and its fruit looked delicious, and she wanted the wisdom it would give her. So she took some of the fruit and ate it. Then she gave some to her husband who was with her, and he ate it too. We could talk about this passage till we all die. There's so much going on here. But central to the issue here is people were made as contingent beings, which means humans don't have in themselves what they need to survive. And they pushed back on that. People were made to be in a dependent relationship with God for wisdom and direction, and they said, we would just as soon be God. Now, they might not have said it like that, but they were created to trust in God to navigate life. Not in a cookie-cutter way, not in a black and white way, but in a relational way. And they said, we would like to navigate life ourselves. And so without being too intense, I would just suggest that when we arrive at the place where we say, I don't need truth, in effect, practically speaking, what we're saying is, I'll be truth. I'll be the standard by which decisions are made. I'll navigate which way to go. I'll decide for myself what is true and right and beautiful and good. That doesn't mean we won't seek outside counsel. It doesn't mean we won't seek wisdom. It does mean that because we're submitted to no one and nothing, that we're the standard. Like the buck stops with us. And so as important and difficult as the struggle with truth is, I think it's helpful to call it for what it is. You're putting the crown on yourself. You're saying, I'll be God. I'll discern truth. I'll lead my own life. I heard Dallas Willard say this week that there's repeated studies have been done, and living well it isn't in any direct relationship with intelligence. In other words, you can't say that with higher intelligence comes better living. Life doesn't happen that way. which we know this. Maybe you've heard the joke about the 4 guys who were in the back of the airplane, and the pilot looked back and said, hey guys, bad news, plane's going down, and he grabbed his parachute and he jumped out, which left 4 people in the airplane, 3 parachutes. First guy stood up, said, I'm the most intelligent man in the world. I got to live him out of here. He jumped out of the airplane. Next man stood up, said, I'm the best athlete in the world. I play for the Broncos. It's bleak. Grabbed a parachute, jumped out of the airplane. He was out of there, which left 2 people, an 80-year-old man and a 16-year-old girl. The 80-year-old man looked at the 16-year-old girl and said, I've lived a great life. You're barely getting started. Take the parachute. Girl threw the old man a parachute and said, good news. Smartest man in the world just jumped out of the airplane without a parachute. We can think our way to truth. It's an option that God gives us. And the other option, and you won't be surprised that it's the option I'm presenting, is that we can try Jesus. And I'll unpack that word try a little bit more as we go. But I think it's important that when we look at the text, what we see in the gospel is God takes truth as a concept and he makes it a person. He takes truth as something we know by studying. And he makes truth something we know by having a friendship, by having a relationship. God takes this idea of truth and moves away from books and ideas and concepts and says, I'm going to embed it in a person. He'll show you truth. Towards the end of his life, when he was undergoing trial, you may have heard of this guy named Pontius Pilate. Well, the deal there was he was a Roman officer, and if the Jews killed Jesus without the Roman permission, then they would be next. And so they had to manipulate Rome's stated execution of Jesus. Jesus and Pilate have this interaction near the end of his life. And for some mysterious reason, I can't find it in my Bible. What is the reference? Oh, yeah. Jeez. Verse 37, Pilate says to Jesus, so you're king. Jesus said, you say that I'm a king, for this I have been born, and for this I have come into the cosmos, to demonstrate the power of truth. Everyone who seeks truth hears my voice. To which Pilate says, what is truth? And scholars have remarked about this passage for a long time. And one of the more noted things is the fact that Jesus doesn't answer the question. Pilate says, what is truth? Deadpan. Jesus has got nothing to say. And many would suggest, because Jesus isn't interested in that conversation, what is truth is not what Jesus concerned himself with. Jesus' interest was who is truth. Jesus' life says, I'm the truth. You want truth? It's relationship with me. See, when you say to God, God, I need truth. Where is truth? He doesn't hand you a book. He doesn't hand you a creed. He doesn't hand you a church. He doesn't hand you an ideology. He doesn't hand you a denomination. He doesn't even hand you a religion, and he certainly doesn't hand you Christianity. When you say to God, I need truth, God says, why don't you enter into a relationship with my son? That's the truth that he concerns himself with. In John 6, I myself, this voice version of John that we talked about last week, that's what I've been working through. That's what this is, but it's the whole New Testament. John 6 is this remarkable text, or John 8, excuse me. I got to get out of the way, don't I, so you can read it. Jesus says, I'm the light that shines through the cosmos. If you walk with me, you'll thrive in the nourishing light that gives life, and you will not know darkness. We talk about head knowledge. I think it's important to note that the Bible knows nothing of head knowledge. Doesn't mean it devalues it, doesn't say it's unimportant. It's not what the Bible concerns itself with. When the Bible talks about truth, it's talking about living. Like the Bible says Jesus wears the black belt. Jesus is the boss. Jesus is he's the leader. He's the president. When the Bible talks about truth, what it's saying is if you want to know how to live, if you're looking for that kind of truth, Jesus is your guy. People who study epistemology will tell us that one of the most important things about knowledge is that you don't carry the argument further than it's designed to carry you. It's kind of heady. What that means is math can tell you a lot of things. You can know a lot of things because of math. But if you take that knowledge and try to write a love letter with it, you'll fail miserably. You've taken the argument further than it's designed to go. I've heard people use biology as an example. Biology can tell us a lot of stuff, but when you take that knowledge and try to apply it to spirituality, you're trying to take the argument further than it's designed to go. I would argue that Jesus' interest when it comes to truth is living. It's this afternoon. It's tomorrow. It's navigating the marriage. It's raising the kids. It's paying the bills. It's filling the void. It's enjoying. It's life. And while I think there's a caution on Christ followers that we need in our own right to be careful not to carry the argument further than it's designed to go, I think we've also got to recognize Jesus says he's truth. And I realize this kind of leans towards some message of like, Jesus is the answer, like biology, math, geography. And that's not what I'm saying at all. But when you ask the question, can truth be known? God says, well, if you're talking about navigating life, Jesus is your guy. He's your guy. I want you to hear a little bit from Dallas Willard in an interview done between he and John Ortberg that I think speaks to this idea of trying Jesus. And then I'll pray and we'll sing.
Let me get in one more question in this session. One person writes, I believe there is a God. I believe that we do not cease to exist after death. I pray, I try to be good. I try to live by the golden rule. What I don't understand is Jesus. Why is he such a big deal if I believe in God? And if he is such a big deal, how would you advise me to proceed to experience Jesus?
Don't start by trying to believe the big truths about Jesus. Start by simply putting into practice the things that he said, trusting him to be right about it. And if you do that, then you gradually find out what a big deal he is. I mean, the big deal about Jesus...
So you'd say if there's somebody who finds himself saying, I'm just not sure about could he be the Son of God thing, instead of trying to get them to believe or them trying to force themselves to believe that, actually start by trying to live what it is that he taught.
That's right. And that's how you find out what he's really like. I really do advise people constantly is don't try to make yourself believe something you don't believe. Belief is not something you can do by choice. It comes as a result of finding reality. Reality brings belief.
But see, then you're kind of messing with people because you're saying they can't know something unless they're willing to actually change their life.
That's a very standard sort of thing in human life, is we want people to know things by trying them out. And that's customarily the way we get to know a person, which is kind of funny to talk about trying them out. We don't mean that exactly. But we get to know them. We have dinner with them. We talk with them. We work with them. And so
But I don't think people generally think about God in that category. We expect to have an armchair discussion about it, but not to actually have to do things in order to find out if he is there or not or who Jesus is.
Yes, but in the realm of persons, armchair discussions will never do. It's acting with them. It's joining with them in things. And really, the best way to know God is to act as if he were real and put your life on the line and see what happens. That's, the atheist prayer, oh my God, if there is a God, save my soul if I have a soul. It's astonishing how many people have found God by praying that prayer, but they were at the end of their rope. And that's where we learn things. So you don't have to believe that it's true. You just have to be willing to try. That's all it takes.
Different, huh? What is truth? Can it be known? Does truth with capital T exist? I would suggest to you that if your interest is living and living well, Jesus is truth. And if you're at this place where you want to try Jesus, we have a stack of the Gospel of John over there, and last week we ran out, so sorry if you missed that, you can grab one this week. That's really just an opportunity in a non-intrusive, kind of non-Bible-y way. It just looks like a book to explore Jesus and wrestle with whether or not trying him out is something you want to do. I'm going to pray and sing a little bit. Why don't you just take a moment in the solitude and silence of your chair to just talk to God about whatever it is you're thinking or process whatever it is you're thinking about. Maybe you're eager now to tell God of your desire to try him. Tell him that. Lord God, thank you for Jesus. Thanks, Lord, that when it comes to living well and navigating life and all of its unique components, thanks, God, that you don't point us to a list of commands. You don't point us to a standard rhetoric. That you don't have a mold of what would Jesus do for all of us. That, God, you have a relationship. And that in entering into a relationship with your Son, we get the 8th day, we get the garden back, we get to once again navigate life with you, dependent upon you for truth and understanding and wisdom in life. God, I pray for my friends here this morning who are contemplating you. Just trust you in that process, God, and pray that you give them wisdom in that pursuit. God, for people who've followed you for a time and maybe just been agitated towards people who struggle with truth, that there be a new grace in their heart. Maybe a new understanding of what your claims about yourself were and what they weren't. God, I pray for the students in particular this morning who are headed out into conversations and classrooms where these questions will be asked in ways that none of us can anticipate the weight of those. That through your Spirit and through your people, a confidence in your Son would win the day. That you'd help them speak and think intelligently, openly, candidly, and yet continue to put their trust in Jesus. God, we love you. Thanks for your Son. Thanks for the Gospels. In Jesus' name we pray.